All right. Sharon, this is our first LinkedIn Live. I think at this stage now, this has been broadcast on LinkedIn. I'm new to this game, so it's a bit of a baptism of fire, but we're live now, live at 5. It's 5 in Dublin, and you're in Cascais, just outside Lisbon, so I think it's 5 o'clock there as well. So, yeah, I think the idea here today is it's a quick fireside. I think I'm going to forget about everybody that is either logging in or not. Maybe we'll have an audience of none. We might have a few extra people join us. I'm not sure. If anybody is joining us, thank you. And put a comment in there. I'm using StreamYard. I have no idea what happens if your comments will come up and if I know that they're from you. But if they do and you ask a question, we'll try and answer them.
Oh,
there's Jessie. Jesse's saying, go, Allan. Okay, so that's great. Thanks, Jessie. Jesse has got a very interesting business in South Africa, but maybe we get him on the show. Maybe this will become a show, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, just very quick, Sharon, maybe you want to introduce yourself. The two of us met at the Irish Portuguese Business Network, and we have similar passions and interests in terms of working with Scaleups and working with the leaders in Scaleups. So maybe you can just give me a quick intro.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the invitation today, Allan. I'm really delighted to be on your first journey because this is also mine. So very, very exciting for both of us. So a little bit about me. So I'm Sharon Dehmel. I'm a coach and I specialize in leadership coaching, but not for the C-suite. I specialize in the young and emerging leaders who are coming up. And the other aspect that I really am passionate about is intercultural coaching. So I combine the two together because I think nowadays there is no organization that isn't multicultural, be it with the clients or with the staff. And, I help them to navigate those challenges, which can be both amazing, but also can be quite challenging at times. So that's me.
Great. And for anybody that knows my content or knows me, I help businesses scale well, and I just help management teams find focus and just help with alignments and very much on the operational side of things. So I've got a couple of interesting questions for you, and I'm sure you might have one or two, and I'm sure the audience might have one or two as well. But I think the first one is, and I see this all the time, I think, and the intercultural piece I think is interesting, and I'd like to touch on that in a second or two, because as companies start scaling and they move into, let's say, a Series B where they're getting considerable investment, that's when they're moving into different geographies. And sure, they might have had product market fit before, and they might be building their team around a central location. But now that they're starting to push teams out to different countries, that cultural element comes in. But I think the one question I have for you is, and I think it's this pressure on the new manager. And I think as companies scale, a new management layer is formed. And sometimes individual contributors are becoming managers for the first time. And these managers are under pressure because not only are they managing the team of 10, 15 direct reports, they might be managing across the organization as well as managing up, which is tricky enough. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the, I think, hard transitions to make for these new middle managers. I call them the engine of the organization because they're the ones who really make sure everything works. It's, going from managing, being one of the lads or one of the girls to, managing your buddies is a very difficult transition to make. And very often it's not that they don't believe in you, it's that you get in your own way as a leader and you're so focused on what are they thinking about your leadership and what are you doing right or wrong, is that you're not actually focusing on what they need and how you can support them. And also realizing, nobody expects you to have all the answers because, it could well have been them as well, and they don't have all the answers. And it's a hard place to be because you're going, more than likely, you're a subject matter expert and you're really good at what you do. And that's why you've got this amazing opportunity. But all of a sudden now you not only have to deal with your buddies, but you also have to perhaps manage people who are older, more experienced than you. And then you also have to turn up at meetings and be able to influence and be heard at the table. And that can be quite challenging for them.
Mm. That's interesting. I mean, you just touched on a point there that some new managers might be managing somebody older than them. Have you come across that? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that when you're coaching managers to deal with somebody that might be older or somebody that might have a bit more experience in a more technical realm?
I think, no matter where you go, there's always going to be somebody who knows more than you do. That's the reality of life. But the first place I always start is with them. What do they know? What do they bring to the table? Because you can't lead others if you're not coming from a place of self-awareness and understanding your strengths, both from a professional, what is your leadership style, what are you passionate about, what are your values, so that they really show up understanding who they are. And even from a cultural perspective is looking at, what are, because culture impacts what good communication looks like, what feedback looks like. So what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. I might be somebody who prefers things to be, cushioned a little bit. I don't want to be told that's an absolute rubbish job. Whereas you might be somebody, just tell me what, if it's wrong, I want to know it straight away, and I don't care who's listening. So it's helping them to understand the nuances of leadership and how culture can impact leadership and also business. So the first half of the work I do is focusing on the leader themselves. And they should, at the end of that process, come away feeling really confident about what they bring to the table. And then the next part is focusing on the others, which is the people that they're leading, because their role is to support them, to mentor them, to empower them, to allow, how are they going to support them to achieve their goals? And, what is the growth that they're looking to get from the position that they're in? And all of a sudden it changes because you're no longer worried about you. You're now focusing on them. And that's what matters, is you're there to support, and make sure that they have everything that they need to do their job.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think, again, and I've seen this as well before, where a new manager, particularly in the tech space, the technical realm, they may come into the role thinking they're a tech leader, and they're still going to be working on projects, and they're going to be coding all day long, and they might have a bit of time, and they may organize the pizza and beer on Fridays, and it's kind of not that, because their role needs to change. It almost needs to split or reverse to almost 70% working with the team, which is a huge shift for them, and maybe 30% technical where they're doing review, etc. But their primary focus is on developing the people that are reporting into them. So do you find, how do you have specific tools that you train or speak to new managers about with regards to that?
I think, the magic sauce is always the one-on-ones. A lot of it's all about building trust. You cannot expect people to work with you, to believe in you as a leader, if you haven't spent the time up front in building that relationship. I always say to people, be it if they're working with a new team or even with a new client's team, is you have to invest in setting up the working relationship. It takes time and it takes a lot of effort. It's like going to the gym. Now, you can set up your calendar and you do those one-on-ones and it all looks very nice and you're being very proactive. But a bit like going to the gym, you can go and do your workout, but actually at the end of a couple of months, you don't see any change in your fitness, or in your muscle tone or whatever, because you're just ticking the boxes. And it's that intentional leadership piece where they show up, and every meeting that they have with the individual is to make sure that they're on target. It's about their performance, their growth, and also their safety, because, it's really important that people feel, if I make a mistake, if I don't speak up, what are the impact of that? If you don't know as a leader, because I personally find, I always like to know what's going on, and I don't like to be, I don't like surprises. I don't want to get a complaint from a client about something that I could have been more proactive about if the person on my team felt confident enough to say, listen, do you know what, Sharon, I've messed up here. I'm not sure what to do. But that doesn't happen overnight. That takes effort and that takes persistence. And it's hard because you're always going to have everybody, we have to go to this important meeting, you have to go to that important meeting. And that's about prioritizing what is actually important. Because if the people delivering the services and goods to your organization are not important enough to give them the time, then your company is not going to go very far.
Yeah, it's interesting. The one-to-one meeting and I've said this before in some of my posts, the one-to-one meeting that you have with your direct report's such a strong term these days, but with the person on your team is almost more important than any other meeting you have. So yes, you've got to do your operational meetings and everything like that, but that one-to-one time, it needs to be scheduled. It can't be cancelled. It's an important space. And it almost, you've almost got to prime the team saying, this is your space, come to the meeting prepared, I'm here to remove blockers. There's actually an interesting question from Jesse there around, and it's something I've experienced, is when you move to a new manager role, you may have been friends in the team, so that trust would have been established. So let's say two teammates, one person screwed up, they'd share about things, they would know how each other operate because they spoke as teammates before. Now suddenly one person's been moved into a management role or a tech lead role or a sales lead role, and they're having to now work with this person on meeting objectives in a very different way. So how do you, just to Jesse's question there, how do you separate yourself as a new manager versus sort of
I always say to them, well, what would you do if the shoe was on the other foot? If they were the manager, how would you like them to show up for you in that situation? And all of a sudden they go, oh, right, okay. Because the thing about what I love about coaching is that we have 90% of the time, we have the answers ourselves, So it's not that there's some magic book out there. It's actually tapping into what what you would like, how you would like to be treated in this situation. And they very quickly come up with a response, and it's their response. It's not like there's a, one answer for every individual. It's, that's the whole idea, is that it's their situation, their unique circumstances, the complexities of their organization, and they come up with a solution that matches those needs.
Do you know, it's funny, I just saw a comment in there from Bernadette about standing in somebody else's shoes, and it's just what you said there. It's such a good way to do that, to say, hang on, I'm struggling with this. How would it be if the shoe was on the other foot? It's quite a powerful way just to sort of say, okay, let me tame the ego a little bit and think, hang on, what happens if this was the other way around? How would I want to be treated? So
it was really interesting. I was working with somebody recently, and they were really worried about the whole performance management and what to do and blah, blah, blah. So I got them to take me through all the worst of they've ever, all the top 10 worst experiences they've had around performance management. So and the speed at which he was able to list it was incredible. So then we just flipped it, and he then had his own best practice on what to do around around performance management, getting feedback from somebody who's not actually your manager, never seeing them from one end of the year until the actual annual performance management. So all of those things he identified, really direct feedback, which was not something that he appreciated, asking, well, what does it look like? What would you prefer? How would you like us to work around this? And not assuming that it's one size fits all for everybody. So I think that's what I love, is they get really, the leaders that I work with get really energized, and it really builds their confidence, because they realize, I can do this. I've got what it takes. I just need to tap into my own experiences to inform. Now, obviously, there's best practice out there as well, and it's bringing the two together. But it can be very overwhelming, because when there's so many things that you have to get right. There's so many things you have to get right in terms of, as you mentioned earlier on, influencing not just your peers, the people you're managing, but also the C-suite, and turning up at those important strategic meetings. One minute you're looking at technology, and the next minute you're talking about strategy, where we're going to be in 3 years' time. And that can be a big leap for somebody to make.
Especially somebody moving in. And I think there was a question there as well. I think Jesse talking about hiring a manager in from external or promoting internally. I would sort of see that as, where possible, you want to create a promotion path internally, but I also don't think that promotion path internally has to be a manager all the time. I think if you're a strong individual contributor, and you're really strong, and you're good at writing code all day long, and really good code, then you need to be moving into a principal or a, almost like there needs to be a promotion path for you, where you don't necessarily have to manage a team. You can lead, or you can be a thought leader. So you could be an individual contributor and write thought leadership articles around what you're doing to drive the team engagement. You don't have to manage people one-to-one, because you're just going to fail at that. So I think that's where you potentially you would hire externally. But if you're a fast scaling company, there's going to be a combination. You're going to want to move people through the organization and give them career path. But at the same time, you're going to need to balance that with external hiring.
Yeah, it's interesting that when I work with these leaders, we unpack, as I said, what are they? Are they results focused? Are they people focused? Are they combination? Are they thought leaders or whatever? And it's really interesting because all of a sudden everything makes sense to them. And I, it's particularly for scale ups, you don't have to follow the traditional path or the only way to get a promotion, particularly when I was first promoted into a management role was, you had to do your time at different levels, and that was the only way to go. And it would always involve people. But people is not always what, as you said, rightly said, what people want. So I think it's really important for scale ups to create alternative for these people so that because they have so much to value, particularly from a strategic point of view, taking that amazing technical knowledge that they have and passion and using it to drive their future strategic path. And also it means then for the other people in the organizations, when they see that happening, they see a role for them in the future. And they're not like going, there's nothing for me here because I don't want to be leading a team. The other side of that, though, is that there's always collaboration. And the people who don't want to be leading people actually have to have very good people skills, whether they like it or not. Because if you're going to be a thought leader in an organization and you're going to be driving strategy, that requires you to collaborate and to be able to influence. And they definitely are people skills. So again, I would work with people and giving them very simple tools to empower them to feel more comfortable until they can take those training wheels off and they just go on their own.
Absolutely. And in terms of the other thing is the movement of information downstream. And I think in scale ups, this can be quite tricky because the founders who used to, and probably still will do as the business is scaling, they'd have the all hands meetings, they'd have the town hall meetings, whatever you want to call them, where they share information on a regular basis. Could be quarterly, it could be weekly. But I think the important thing there is there's a lot of the time where that C-suite or the founding or the executive team are actually disseminating information down to their new management teams, to their new management levels. How does the manager know when what they can share down? Because ideally you want them to share as much as possible, and what can't be shared. So what might need to be kept a little bit more strategic. How do you work with managers around sort of how information flows both ways?
I think you always have to tailor it to no matter what you're doing. You always tailor it to your audience. So it's rule 101 of presentation. Who are you speaking to? What matters to them? What are they concerned about? But you want them also to feel, because it's part of the vision of the organization, the purpose of the organization, and where their role in the organization fits into that. So it's really important that people feel, particularly when organizations are constantly stretched. Nobody ever has enough resources. They never do. So it's being, and I think sometimes you have to question yourself as the leader. If you're trying to protect people, the assumption you're making, if it's bad news or if it's concerning news, is that they can't handle this. And that actually is, we do this as parents, but the reality is that people are a lot more resilient than you think they are. And I think that, the core things that create anxiety and stress, if a company was merging or, they lost a key client and they have to go, people get really anxious and stressed if they don't have over information, not enough information, uncertainty, and, conflict, obviously. So as a leader, you really have to step back, and, sometimes we can be overprotective, and our intentions are good, but the impact can be negative. So I think you really have to, I think as an organization, that has to be agreed together. What is it that we share? What do we don't share? But ideally it should be very transparent anyway, what you're doing, where you're going, because otherwise, why would I bother showing up to work if I don't know what role I play in this organization? How do I add value? Because I want to feel, people want meaning and purpose in their lives nowadays. They're not just showing up for a paycheck anymore. And that really is important. So I think you have to question the assumptions that you're making about the people, and that can be difficult at times.
Yeah, interesting. And I think there's a question that's just come in there in the comments around how important structure is when it comes to collaboration. And collaboration doesn't necessarily mean bringing the team together and having a friendly Friday or an outing or a team building exercise. I think collaboration could be how you build is the actual structure of what you do. So what we just spoke about now, sharing information. I mean, I think one thing I like to focus on, again, on the operational side, is the handover processes between teams. And again, you can create real ownership in a team. Let's say you've got a sales team that are working closely with engineering. What happens when a sale takes place? When does that move to the project team that need to implement, or the delivery team that need to deliver? How does that impact the engineering in terms of new capacity that's required? Do they need to scale certain systems because of a large new customer coming on board? And the handover process, I think, is a really, really good structure, to use the word, but is a good mechanism to drive collaboration across teams. And I think that's one opportunity that I think is very powerful, where managers and organizations, or new managers, we talk about team development or new manager development in Scaleups, but if managers can empower their teams to work in cross-functional projects, or to say, where are the gaps in our current process, or do we understand the flow from the one team to the other, or do we understand what marketing are doing? And if they can actually sort of write processes and get involved with other teams, that's a very, very powerful way to drive collaboration across the team. And again, it starts at the top. So if you see your founding team collaborating well, and they use the same mechanisms across collaboration mechanisms, like the way they run meetings with the management team, then that management team is going to work with their individual teams in a similar way. And if you can be consistent. So sure, I mean, I think we've seen this in tech. You may have different tech stacks. You might have a legacy team focusing on a different way of software development to somebody that might be running agile. Somebody might be using one system like Asana. Somebody might be using another system. It doesn't matter what systems necessarily to do the building, as long as there are certain structures. And the other structure there, just to get back to the structure question, is the principles or the values, and making sure that I speak about this. I know when I work with customers and I talk about values, and I say you've got to drive values right throughout the organization. You've got to be talking about your values every single day. I spent some time at Amazon and in AWS, and they have their leadership principles. And there isn't a meeting or a review session or an all hands meeting where a value or a principle is not called out. And people are praised in public for living those values or principles. And sometimes they're managed in a different way if they're not performing, in a one-to-one environment, because they're not living the principles. So that's a really, really powerful structure, is living that in terms of how you hire according to principles. So that's pretty powerful. Any other points? I know we said we'd go on for around 25 minutes and answer a few questions. I think we've done around that, but is there anything else from your side, Sharon, that you want to share?
No, I was just thinking about what you were just saying about how important it is that the senior leaders role model how they want not just themselves to behave, but also everybody in the organization. And one of the things, I think COVID obviously was absolutely detrimental, but a positive thing was, with Zoom calls or Teams or whatever your tool you're using, is the ability to pop in and out to different meetings and get that sense of what's going on, and using those tools to give exposure to your future prospective leaders and let them see what do these meetings look like? What are the worries, if you go to, and I think that's a very simple and practical way of giving those future potential leaders insights as to what challenges they can expect, and vice versa. Also, so can the senior team turn up at the operational meetings, because if you really want to understand what's going on in your organization, it's to sit down beside the people who are actually delivering the products and service to your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've worked with companies as well where we streamline their reporting system, and we try and build a cadence around the management team where they run an operational report, where they bring metrics to the meeting. They go through their reports very quickly. They always talk about their highlights. They talk about their metrics. They talk about whether their key metrics in their organization are trending up or down. and they also talk about their projects. And you can run a very, very optimized report or ops meeting and then invite people in. So let's say, for example, you've got an engineering team and they're doing a big feature release and they want to talk about that. They'll have their ops meeting where they're talking about some of what they're doing. Sure, they're going to have their scrum meetings, and that's going to be run in, with the engineering team. But they may have an operational meeting where they're saying, we're doing this big thing. Let's invite sales and marketing to this so that they can see what's coming downstream. Same applies for sales. Sales might turn around and say, look, we're about to close a very large banking customer, for example, and this is going to result in a huge amount of additional capacity or private links into the bank or whatever it might be. And people start understanding, and that creates the context. And then again, coming back to the values, you use the values then to drive the trade-off conversation. So what are our values? Are our values that we need to sort of put customer thinking first? Okay, how does that impact these two teams' ability to deliver? Where do we have the trade-off? And I think everything is a trade-off. And if you don't have trade-offs, you're going to end up with everybody going in different directions. So, Sharon, anything else from your side around team development? Anything we've forgotten about? We're probably going to need to do a part 2. I didn't.
Yeah, I think
we've certainly got one fan in the audience. We've got one fan in the audience that's asked a few questions, which has been fantastic. Jesse, thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
So we'll have to get you on. He's actually got a fantastic hiring software, very, very cool video software that he's rolling out. And it's pretty interesting. So we'll probably have to get Jesse on for a conversation at some point. But Sharon, anything else from your side?
No, I think that, if we start another conversation, we'll be here for another half an hour or a couple of hours. Yeah. So I think it's good idea to finish here. But it's been wonderful. And thank you again for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed it. All
right. No, I appreciate it. It's great chatting to you. And once again, we're in a similar space. We're passionate about the same thing. We love working with tech scale-ups, and it's interesting. And thanks for everyone for the feedback. Bernadette, thank you for your comments as well, and Shane and everybody else. And we will chat soon.
Take care.